Welcome back to another episode of Hungry with the Word Pod. As always, I'm your host, Tommy Vento, with the lovely Julie Vento, my co-host. And today, episode 30, and I thought it was fitting, I'll say, that episode 30, 30 being the year that we most consider Jesus's earthly ministry to have started. Um, and the topic I'd like to talk about today is you would trust a pilot. And what I mean by that is I saw this video the other day, and I think it was from um, maybe the Pray Instagram account. And it said, you trust a pilot that you don't know to get you safely across the country in a metal tube. You would trust a ship captain that you don't know and go on a cruise for 7 days. You would trust a fireman who you've never met to pull you out of a house. In fact, a lot of us trust a mechanic we've never met to work on our car. And how much more then can we trust the teacher who has not only made himself known to us, but as has been the theme lately, wants you to flourish. And yes, it doesn't always look like flourishing on the path to flourishing. And I think there's some kind of beautiful paradoxical wisdom there. But I wanted to focus on um, a couple verses specifically today about trusting in the teacher and how and why we can trust in him, but also just to maybe examine in your own life where you're much more willing to perhaps trust another source besides him. Um, for me, that was myself. In a
Mm-hmm.
lot of ways, I trusted myself, my judgment, my interpretation, my experience much more than the God of the universe. And I know how funny it is to, almost sarcastically say that aloud, but just to recognize that in a lot of ways it was never malicious, I'll say, to blatantly distrust him, but that in so many ways he's, spoken a word to me. He's given me things. I've got tons of stones of remembrance. I've got countless testimonies, and yet still trusting my own fear and doubt more than his word. And
Mm-hmm.
so I suppose before we jump into that, any thoughts specifically?
Well, I was just thinking of the maturing process. As human beings, we also go through a level of very selfishness, you know, um,
Mm,
trusting in self, just kind of how you see things and stuff, and we
almost a
mature out of
necessary
that.
selfishness,
Yeah,
right?
exactly. You're hungry, you cry.
Mm-hmm.
You.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that just very similar when we start walking with Christ. It's let's give ourselves some grace
Yeah.
that some of those things are going to be there, but it should be an intention of ours to become more and more trusting of God for those things rather than ourselves.
Yeah, totally. Well, and that's, I'll say, as usual, a great segue into the verse itself, because I know I can, sort of generically say, I trust God. And
Hmm.
we're so multidimensional. There's different areas of our life where we do and don't trust Him.
Hmm.
And um, for, I think for a lot of people, and especially a lot in my generation, we're living at a time of such tremendous uncertainty where
Hmm.
you could read one news headline that says, look, the economy's bouncing back. And then the next news headline that's just a few scrolls away from it says, look, we're on the brink of an epic collapse. And
Hmm.
there's, countless perils that we have to deal with, and a solid handful of nefarious characters who are contributing to or orchestrating that nonsense. And yet,
Mm-hmm.
even aside from all of that, you know, it's still, I think, really important to think, where do I see myself in 3 to 5 years? What am I
Mm-hmm.
working towards? What am I thinking about? And in so many ways, I felt like I had control through the first 23 to 25 years of my life as far as um, not just the direction I was headed per se, but the deciding on the destination specifically. And in a lot of ways, I am such a person of certainty that I prefer to have as much of the blueprint beforehand as possible. And when you feel that you're controlling everything and all that happens around you and the whole world, you do need as much information and blueprints and logistics as possible so that you can make the best decision. And in the last couple of years, really seeing not only how much I am not in control, but how me deciding beforehand where I want to go is an incomplete decision in and of itself, because the version of me, if you will, who believes that they want that is not the same version of me that will arrive there. And that's where I know that the Lord has had me on a little bit shorter of a leash in the last, several months, a couple of years even, where it's less important for me to look so far off at the horizon and much more so at the 6 inches in front of my face that I can control. And again, even to use that word control, we've been talking, what do I have control over? My response, my
Mm-hmm.
outlook, in some way, shape, or form. Not that you can control the emotions, you can control your interaction with them, and you can control the, again, control, such a funny word, but that is maybe a kingdom teaching about you surrender to gain control. You
Mm-hmm.
let the current run its full force instead of trying to direct it in order that you can direct it. And
Yes.
so in many ways, this verse has been something that we've come back to a couple of times, I'll say, but still a good reminder, especially, coming off what we've talked about in the last few episodes, where I, on some level, am deciding if I should trust the Lord still in some part of my being as I approach, let's say, a new season, a new chapter, a new challenge. And the way that I have historically said, you should teach me, has
Mm-hmm.
prevented his perfect teaching for me and for this moment to come through. And rather, maybe not prevented it from coming through, but prevented me from recognizing it and participating, and thus it being able to have its full effect. And so, again, in so many ways, I'm like, tell me the plan beforehand so I can approve and make changes, and then we can get on our way.
Mm-hmm.
And when I have a picture in mind, this is the goal that we're working towards, this is the vision, this is the land we're going to take. Proverbs even tells us do that.
Mm-hmm.
But know that when you do that, the Lord will design the steps. You make the plan in your heart, and He'll make every step of the plan along the way, because He's actually the only one who could help you to pull it off. And to anyone, I'm sorry to burst your bubble out there, who thinks that you're actually the master executor, He just has a ton of mercy on you and is allowing that illusion to continue so that you don't crumble. Um, Anyways, so this verse comes from Isaiah 30, and it starts in verse 20. And he says, though the Lord may give you the bread of adversity and the water of affliction, yet your teacher will not hide himself anymore. Your eyes shall see your teacher. And when you turn to the right or when you turn to the left, your ears shall hear a word behind you saying, this is the way, walk in it. And it's that bit right there where he says, and when you turn to the right or the left, that's when you hear the teacher. And in
Mm,
so many ways, I have approached life looking straight on and not paying attention, not having intention, not having personal responsibility or an investment in where I go and how I get there. And I know that that's perhaps too broad of a statement. It's not true across the board,
hmm
but specifically in a couple areas where, you and I've talked about it, I've had a few really hard moments in the last few years where I feel like I'm screaming, I don't know what to do. And there is some truth in that. Honestly, there is some truth in that. And the Lord is so multi-layered that it could be that you're not knowing is you need a lesson in just looking at him instead of looking at where to go.
hmm
And I've gone around that circle a couple of times, but in this instance, I think it was my not knowing what to do allegedly was actually a pretty deep seated fear based in perfectionism that I would rather not make a choice than make a wrong choice.
mm
And a lot of that came from integrity, not wanting to let down the Lord, not wanting
hmm
to drop the ball of my life or people's hearts or a mission, if you will. And what it prevented, though, was me being able to turn my head to the right or the left and hear the teacher say, this is the way. And that,
mm
I think, element is something that I've been missing that he's been talking to me about. Um, and I'll say somewhat annoyingly that the whole world could use a little more of that right now.
hmm
Not putting that off myself because I'm part of traffic. I'm part of the reason that
hmm
the world looks the way it does. And so where can we take this ground, this land in my own life? And I think it involves being able to have the freedom of what we talked about in the last episode, that he has chosen me and will not cast me off, and that he will help me in all future endeavors, that my ability to practice my awareness of his nearness is part of the lesson so that I have the freedom to go fail. And
hmm
I'm putting fail for all those who can't see it in air quotes because failure is such a relative term.
hmm
A few episodes ago, we talked about the book Mindset. And one of the biggest differences between the fixed and growth mindset is how you see failure. And the growth mindset almost exclusively sees failure as a delightful challenge, a wonderful invitation for you to step back up to the plate. Where the fixed mindset, which we talked about, I kind of possessed in a lot of ways, the fixed mindset tells you how much lower your self worth is for having failed and how stupid and dumb and insignificant you are for even having tried. Imagine you having tried.
mm
And I suffered through so much, and I think still do in some ways through those thoughts, those beliefs of myself, that fear, and being able to know that the way he works with me is not by standing behind me at the starting point and saying, you're going to take 10 paces and then take a left. Two more paces, turn back to the right. It's nope, just walk. And you'll turn your head to the right or the left, which to me indicates like a fork in the road, if you will. You're
Mm-hmm.
at a decision point, which we make 10,000 decisions every day and don't
Mm-hmm.
realize we make that many because of how many we're on autopilot. But
Mm-hmm.
coming to this decision point and not feeling like I may choose death, feeling the freedom that he loves me so much that whatever I choose will be woven together as part of my tapestry for good. And I know that that's another verse that I had, maybe talked about in the past. If you don't mind looking it up, I don't have it off the top of my head,
Romans
but
8:28.
maybe that's why it's top of mind. I've been reading Romans so much lately that just again, it's for those who love God, and I know I don't mean to say it exclusively because in the last episode we talked about he's chosen you. And so in loving him, he just weaves it for you. And so being able to step out of such perfectionism and fear when it came to every aspect of my life, much less my walk with him, has even in the last few days done so much for me to remove the burden that I perceived it was to walk with him that really was just pressure I was putting on myself to perform when he wasn't asking me to have a good performance. He was asking me to be with him, you know?
Mm,
And
yeah.
so what's what are you thinking on all that?
Well, kind of a lot. Um,
I love it.
but I think what you're describing originally is uh, surrendering to the Lordship of Jesus. There is um, part of this walk that requires that you understand He's God and you're not,
Mm,
and that there's this surrender and understanding of His Lordship in your life and your ability to relinquish some of that control we thought we had.
mm,
Um, but knowing He's a loving, good Father, and it's okay to do that because
yeah.
He's a safe place to be.
Right.
Um, and then I was also thinking of that turn to the right or to the left. I will tell you, he understanding that how the Lord talks to you, and each person, each sheep will learn how to hear his voice
Yes.
for yourself. So it's very
Yes.
difficult to describe. I think when you and I've talked about it in the past, we we were kind of thinking of like how you and I are talking, that it would be a verbal
Yep.
exchange of words, but it comes out of you. You hear it in a different way. It's very subtle, and you learn to distinguish that between, and it comes out as your voice you hear,
Right.
but you learn to distinguish that, and we've had a whole episode on that. But it's also a GPS system. Like
Yeah.
he said,
Totally.
it's not very common for him to just download, okay, for the next 10 years this
Mm-hmm.
is what it's going to look like for you.
Mm-hmm.
It's because number one, that's not a relationship. What if you did that with your spouse? You get the
Yeah.
marriage license and you say, okay, well, this is what's going to be like for 10 years and I'll talk to you then,
Yep.
you know?
Exactly.
So it's a daily practice. So understanding that these whispers and turn right and pick up the phone and call them, or,
Mm.
look this up, these little hints and nudges is really how it happens all day
Yes. And
as
I
you're walking
love
with
that
him.
I love that you said that because to circle back on me saying I don't know what to do. I don't know where I'm going. I don't know this. In a lot of ways he's shown me not not like with condemnation, well you didn't do this, but gently, hey, I actually have been talking to you the whole time. And I did say call that person, or do this thing, or do
Yeah.
that on your website, or try this, or do that. And you chose, although understandably on some
Mm-hmm.
level, you chose not to listen. And I don't take offense to that. I'm not hurt and betrayed by you. It's still a safe place and I still love you. And yet, that's why you're in this place of saying you don't know. And I was just reminded of this, wisdom. You and I have both been kind of going through the Proverbs, and
Mm-hmm.
wisdom is very prevalent in the Proverbs. She was one of Solomon's close friends. And
Mm-hmm.
so she gets to speak and say, in fact, I think Proverbs 1 starts with wisdom is trying to cry out to you. But
Mm-hmm.
there's a point, and I don't remember where it is, that it says, wisdom, like I, wisdom, when you call on me, I'll answer you. And then if you don't do what I said and calamity falls upon you, I will laugh. And that feels cold,
It
right?
does.
That feels like that's not like God. And on some level, you're right, because it's
Yeah.
wisdom specifically and not the Lord. And yet, wisdom was there with him in the beginning. She delighted in him and was one of his master workers. She's one of the foundational spirits of the Lord. And he kind of defers to her judgment in a lot of ways. It's like you have a nanny and
Mm-hmm.
you might be acting out and think, when my mom comes home, I'm going to get you fired. And the nanny comes home and her mom comes home and the nanny says, yeah, he was kind of doing this all day. And mom turns around and gets mad at you. And so I use that example because the Lord has never been mad at me. That's the beauty of this new covenant. He's never been
He
like,
never will.
Tom, you
Yeah.
idiot. But he was able to candidly, softly, gently put his hand on my shoulder and say, well, you were asking her for advice and then you didn't listen when it came. And so that's partly why you feel like you don't know what to do, because you could be perhaps in a different place. And that can be a really tough pill to swallow.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's why I wanted to name the title of this, episode today, You Would Trust a Pilot, because I did the math. I've flown over 130 times in my life, and it's probably way more than that. I just trying to do the math before the
Mm-hmm.
episode.
Mm-hmm.
And that means 130 times in my short 31 years of existence, I have willingly put my hands and my fate, or put my fate in the hands of a man I didn't know and still to this day don't know. And then how funny of me to do that so willingly and then have my teacher right here with me and choose not to trust him.
Mm.
So that's where that video called me out. And again, I don't even mean called me out in that way, but helped me recognize, as part of this season I'm going through, that my teacher is here. And when I turn to the right or the left, he will say, this is the way, walk in it. And so not hearing his voice was something that I would, um, let's see how to say this. I would let fear masquerade as spirituality. I would
Mm.
let my desire to be perfect and my fear of making a mistake look like spirituality by saying, oh, I'm just waiting for the voice of the Lord. I'm waiting for the green light, which was really saying, I'm waiting for 15 green lights in a row. I'm waiting for the
Mm.
whole plan, the whole download. And you had said that too, he'll show you the vision somewhat obscurely, somewhat truly. I think about Joseph and seeing himself as a ruler in Egypt, and he sees that. And if he had seen that it would mean spending time in jail, being sold by his brothers, suffering,
Mm-hmm.
being away from his family, would he have said yes to the vision? And I think there's there's part of the reason that he doesn't necessarily give you the whole thing. But even more than that, you hit the nail on the head. He wants to walk it with you. He knows that your 100 years here is such a blip compared to the eternity with him that one day you will be known. One day you will know, even as you are already fully known. And so while there still is this slight veil of surprise that can happen, get surprised and
Mm.
walk with me and let me shower you with gifts. One of my favorite things that Chris says is Chris Blackaby, how do you know you're beloved? You have to sit still and observe because that's the only way to truly know. And yes, in human relationships, you know, don't just believe it when they say they love you, watch for the actions. But with God, you don't have to just believe, take him at his word. And I don't mean that as blasphemy. It's easy to say you should, but to the person whose heart has been broken a million times, who's been hurt, who can't trust anyone, including themselves, telling them they should just trust the Lord that they can't see, that's what we've talked about. That's that pat answer. That doesn't
Hmm.
do anything for me here. But knowing that he will show you, you will taste and see his goodness. He will let kindness lead you to repentance. He will show you that you are the beloved to help build your heart towards knowing that you are. And guess what? He does it all for his name's sake and for
Mm.
yours. And so just that, again, I know it's kind of far reaching and complex, the nature of love and trust. And yet I think this is where it starts, is recognizing that he's with you and for you the whole time. And your willingness to just keep walking one more step, one more day, one more try with him is more of what he's looking for than anything. In fact, I think it's funny how we maybe don't spend enough time pointing out that Jesus, at one of the first chances he got to rebuke the scribes and the Pharisees, says, you should go read the scroll of Hosea. Learn what this means. I desire mercy and not sacrifice. And like, even to you, even to me, he's
Hmm.
not looking at me saying, Tom, I need more sacrifice from you. I need more this. I need more that. And it's so easy, especially here in the West, especially in our performance society and culture, to assume that that's what he's looking for. You know, you picture a coach on a basketball team saying, I need more hustle. I need more heart. I need more effort. He might be saying that, but he doesn't say it in that way. And he's certainly not saying, I need more sacrifice. That is the beauty of Jesus. He was the sacrifice once and for all time and for all people. And he is seated at the right hand, making endless, uh, what's the word I'm looking for?
Intercession.
Thank you. Endless intercession for us because we still need it at this juncture. But again, I say all of that just to know that as you walk with him, it's so much more than your effort and your sacrifice. It is your willingness to trust the pilot.
Mm.
That is what he's looking for. That is his heart towards you. And a mustard size seed of faith can grow into the greatest bush in the garden.
Mm.
So we're getting close on time. What have you got?
Well, I just real quick, we we can trust him and love him because he first loved us. And so
Mm,
that's John. And but as you mentioned before, he did sacrifice for us, but understanding what happened and what he accomplished through the death, burial, and resurrection, that is what you can really sink your teeth into, and your faith can hook onto that.
mm.
That he did this and had this plan to be able to connect with you at this time.
Yes.
And it's always been his plan. And I love the way last one you talked about reading Isaiah with the eyes of, this is really what I want for you guys.
Yes.
This idea that I'm imploring you guys. I've really had good things. And Jesus, the way that he walked the earth, is a perfect example of,
Mm,
if, he's the exact representation of God. If God were walking the earth, this is how he would do it.
yep.
So to understand that this is really not only a safe place, but it's a loving place. And that is how you begin to build trust with
Yes.
him.
Totally. And I kind of want to end. You were saying that, and it made me think of, we could all use some encouragement at times, and to just encourage anyone who maybe feels like they've taken a leap of faith, whether it's a 6-inch baby step or faith to move mountains, to really rest in this moment, and to use your words, to sink your teeth into the depth of his goodness, not his goodness to produce some physical structure or pleasure for you on the planet, which can and does come as
Mhm,
part of the inheritance, but to really be able to recognize and accept the invitation on a deeper level to what it feels like to be able to trust someone with your life completely, and
mhm,
the the freedom that can be gained, and I'll say stands to be gained, from total surrender to his faithfulness, that he'll take you at the pace of your soul, and he wants you to see yourself gain victory and take that ground and have more stones of remembrance. But even more than that, he wants to have a relationship with you. And I think there's so much structure that we inherently bring as humans into what a relationship is going to look like.
mhm,
And so, in a lot of ways, where you might feel as though you have evidence not to trust him, evidence that he doesn't love you, be open to the fact that his perfect love doesn't look like our worldly, broken system of loving and communicating that love. And so I can assure you, he does love you, and he's trying to prove it to you. And that's the funny thing. He doesn't have to prove anything to anyone,
mhm.
and he values you so much that he's willing
He's
to
going to
try and
do it
prove to
anyway.
you
Yep.
exactly. And so, if anyone could hear that and be encouraged today, if you will surrender your attachment to your opinion of how he should prove it, you will see that the way he proves it to you is greater and far more lasting.
Amen.
Amen. All right. Blessings, everyone.
Blessings. Bye.